Hi, I'm Richard Stiennon, industry analyst covering the entire cybersecurity space, and we are talking with the CEO of TraitWare, Heath Spencer. Welcome, Heath.
Thanks for having me, Richard. Great to be here.
Heath, I'm excited to hear what TraitWare has to offer, but let's start off, just giving us kind of the high level. How does identity and authentication play into the whole zero trust world?
So in our view of how identity and authentication play into zero trust is that TraitWare believes in, as a framework, I think that zero trust gets a bad rap. I've talked to Chase about this as well, is that it implies that we're not trusting the person, right? But that's not really the case, is we really need to be able to trust that the person is the correct person that's authenticating to the applications or relying parties that they're trying to sign into with their identity. It actually gives the trust back to the user in making sure that your identity isn't stolen or being misused or didn't get phished, etc. So where zero trust at the edge of authentication or identity plays in is we need to be able to deploy multi-factor authentication, more than one way to, more than one factor to authenticate the correct person is who is accessing the data, the application, the information that's behind that gated access. So that's our view, is that zero trust needs to start with where the human needs to access the machine.
Yeah, it's more like assured trust.
Yeah, it is. If we looked at how the NIST standards apply to this environment, you really have two different criteria, right? You have identity assurance level, and then you have authentication assurance level. So with the IAL as the first part of identity assurance, that really comes down to how you onboard a user to an application or a gated access, or how you're onboarding a user to a multi-factor authentication authenticator, whether that's a hardware token or a software token. Once you've onboarded or registered that user to that token, how are you then assured that it was them that's using that token? And we'll go deeper into that on why TraitWare is different. But yes, and then moving beyond the IAL of the NIST standards to the AAL, the authentication assurance level, is you have to have a high level of identity assurance to know that you have a high level of authentication assurance.
Got it. So let's discuss password lists. So what does it mean to you in your implementation?
Yeah, so what it means to us is to be able to authenticate or to log in or to access applications or data or information in a digital environment without having to use a password at all. And really be, passwordless in moving to a token-based access. Our solution eliminates the password. We're not creating one and then hiding it behind the scenes or obfuscating it for you. We're literally moving you or registering you to a secure token and then authenticating you to that token and then having you log in using that token versus creating a password, which is legacy technology, right? So it was time, legacy login was created, password login was created in 1961 at MIT. It was actually, there's history recorded that shows that it was broken within months of being created. These are MIT students, so they're very bright. They figured out very quickly how to misuse that legacy login. So it was time to move to a modern authentication that's token-based versus credential-based.
So how is a token any better than just a really, really long password? It's unique. I imagine some big long hash or something, but what if somebody steals it and tries to reuse it?
Well, so there's different ways that you can do token-based access, right? So there is hardware-based like a YubiKey or Google Titan Key, et cetera, and then there's software-based that are other authenticator apps, et cetera, or there's just delivering certificate-based tokens from machine to machine. TraitWare's implementation creates a software-based token on a mobile device. We think this is convenient because it's a device you're already carrying every day. We then also leverage the native biometrics of that device to authenticate you to the token. So by using that and by using your native biometrics on that token, we're able to assure, right, provide zero trust verification that it's the user authenticating to the token before the token can be used. And we think that that's a big differentiator between a lot of the other environments that are out there, is that we provide a way to authenticate the user to the token before the token can be used to release your identity payload.
That makes sense. Now, how do you interface with my Active Directory where I'm keeping everybody's, authorizations basically?
Right. So with AD, there's hybrid AD environments, whether you've got one in Azure or local on-prem, et cetera. So depending on how your configuration looks, there's some different ways that we have to integrate. We leverage modern authentication standards such as SAML 2.0, OpenID Connect, et cetera, to integrate to those existing IAM directories, right? So if we need to sit in front of your AD, or if you're a younger company that's maybe deployed Okta recently, et cetera, we can sit in front of Okta as well as the passwordless MFA in front of that environment. So we just use authentication standards. And again, those need to be configured properly to make sure that the security's there. But if done so properly and you've got dedicated pipes to communicate those things, you can do it securely with that. And TraitWare's got some proprietary ways that we deliver those, public-private key pairs, et cetera, signed with the nonce and everything else in the transmission of that to deliver that tokenized identity in a secure way.
So tell me about your customers' experience when you're onboarding them. Is there a lot of design work and architecture changes and then slow rollout as you get people enrolled?
So it really depends on the customer's environment. But as with this massive move to remote work that we've all just experienced in the last 16 months, a lot of customers that we're dealing with now had to really move quickly to the cloud. And all of the cloud environments, whether it's AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, et cetera, is the top three, all leverage modern authentication standards. So it's very quick to deploy to those environments, leveraging those authentication standards. It can be done in minutes. And in the deeper dive of our demo, we actually do a live walkthrough of deploying to a Google Workspace application in 5 minutes for this, leveraging those authentication standards. There are environments that have legacy login. I just had a call yesterday with a person that's been at IBM for a long time, and IBM's got stuff that has still mainframe stuff, right? So there's legacy login out there. There are ways to solve that. We are actually one of the first passwordless MFA solutions to be tested with Citrix for on-prem or their cloud environment. Leveraging federated access, we can sit in front of that federated server to then deploy that. So that integration can happen quickly. You can sync users. We've got sync tools for all of that as well. So it really just depends on how modernized your environment is. If you're running a modern environment, whether that's VDI environment through vCenter, VMware, et cetera, or Azure VDI, that can be really quick. Again, using Citrix or other tools like that for on-prem or hybrid VDI environments, and can be quick also. It doesn't take months. It doesn't take a year. It can be done in days for that. And then from the user side of it, right? So the actual onboarding of a user, and this is where HR or IT, whoever the admins of that provisioning or deprovisioning users, becomes really simple. A user can be onboarded to the authentication token in 3 steps in under 2 minutes, and you are no longer provisioning credentials, and you no longer have to have bolt-on multi-factor authentication because it's native to the technology, so you're deploying it in a single step, which creates tremendous more efficiency.
What about when somebody leaves the organization or the contract's over? Is it easy to deprovision them?
It is. It's actually much, that's one of the biggest risks out there, right, is deprovisioning credentials. They get left in Active Directory, et cetera, and they just sit there for a long time. I've actually got a sales engineer that jokes at his prior job that he had a private bathroom because he was left in an AD group that they didn't deprovision, and his cat card got him access into this bathroom because he never got deprovisioned,
Nice.
right? And he was like, I got a private bathroom, right? So with TraitWare, deprovisioning of a token can be done with a simple radio button. You can also create from the logs and everything else, depending on how you're managing your users in Azure. We've got group mappings, et cetera, sync tools with Azure, et cetera, for your AD. So you can actually provision or deprovision entire groups to applications, et cetera, based on what those role-based access, et cetera. But it also, let's say, just in a simple case of a user misplaces their token, right? So your token, which in our case is a mobile phone, fell underneath your car seat, you've misplaced it. You can, just like trying to temporarily deactivate your credit card, you could contact your admin with a single radio button. They can deactivate your token. And then let's say you found it 30 minutes later, they can turn it back on. But let's say you lost it entirely. Let's say you were boating on the lake and it fell on the bottom of the lake, et cetera. Then a neat thing about recovery with TraitWare is that all of your application access is actually created in an authentication server, not directly on the token. This is another differentiator with a lot of other authenticator apps that are out there, is that if I need to be reprovisioned to a token, I get a new phone, I get reprovisioned to that token, going back to the NIST standards of identity assurance, right? How they reprovision me either in a face-to-face, quote-unquote in-person situation in today's world with COVID, doing it in a video conference like this, or could be sent to a trusted email, et cetera. But once I'm reprovisioned to my token, I have instant passwordless multi-factor authenticated access to all the applications that were already established with the authentication server. I don't have to reestablish the relationship or the relying party trust with each application, which is the case for most other authenticator tokens, whether it's a YubiKey or Google Titan Key or an authenticator app such as Duo. You've got to create that trust relationship again with each application because they're direct with the token. So with ours, recovery becomes very, very simple.
Cool. So give me a feel for the business direction and level of TraitWare today. Where are you at on your business journey of growing a company?
So we're early stage in our business journey. We've had some success within the healthcare space, within the real estate space, gaining some traction within the fintech space. Just completed our SOC 2 Type 1 audit and are in process of achieving our SOC 2 Type 2 by May of this year. As a use case example, one of the first enterprise deployments that we had was to a healthcare software provider. If we think about identity, there's really two verticals. There's workforce identity and there's customer identity. So phase one of that was for their workforce identity. The pain point that they had is that they're under federal regulation to be a FedRAMP shop because they're funded by state and federal grants, et cetera, and they provide software to healthcare clinics that are state and federally backed. And so they had to meet FedRAMP. So the level of multi-factor authentication they were using prior to TraitWare was RSA keys. And also they weren't allowed to use SSO. They had to maintain siloed data sets because of the health record information, et cetera, needs to be maintained individually, right? So with that, their system admins were literally having to be provisioned to upwards of 5 or more unique username and passwords paired to a separate RSA key, and then authenticate multiple times a day, picking the right username and password and the right RSA key to then authenticate to that. So in that deployment, we displaced all of their RSA keys, gave the user a single pane of glass, but maintained a unique identity to each one of those siloed environments, and deployed the MFA inherent in that login rather than having a separate step for the user. So that's just a high-level view of one of the use cases that we've done for that. And so, does that answer your question?
Yeah, completely. That's really great. I'm really looking forward to seeing your in-depth demo. Thank you very much, Heath.
Anything else you want to know?
I think that's it.
Okay, great.
Cool. Well done.
Thank you.